former colleague, Alisyn Camerota, who is new-ish to Substack. Is that fair?
A little more than 2 weeks.
Okay, so that's definitely fair. 2 weeks is so. Um, First and foremost, before I do anything else, I want to make sure that people go and subscribe to Alisyn's Substack. Alisyn, tell people how they can do that briefly, and and then give them a sense of like what you're writing about, what you're talking about.
So it's at Alisyn Camerota. Very
Oh,
simple.
good branding.
Yep, yep. Branding. And I did that. I mean, I did that intentionally because the Substack gurus who help us with our launch basically said that, because I want to talk about so many different things and I'm not in any one particular lane or any one particular brand, just do Alisyn Camerota. And so that has worked so well. I really, it's funny, Chris. There's so many things that are so different and in some ways super liberating after having been in broadcast journalism, conventional broadcast journalism for so long. And one of them is I was always looking for the angle. When we worked at CNN, for every story that I did, for every segment, what's the angle that I want to highlight?
Totally.
3.5 minutes, 4 minutes. So that's zero in. And so I was doing that when I first, what I thought I would be doing that when I joined Substack. What's my angle? And the fact is that, we're all kind of multidimensional and we can talk about lots of different angles.
Yes. And that's one of the things that people, and we'll talk about this, but people always say to me, like, man, you must feel so liberated now. And I'm like, to be honest, like, I know that people want that narrative of like, uh, some media overlord would like come to me and be like, Chris, you can't write this and you have to write this. But like that never happened to me. Like I worked at the Washington Post, Marty Barron never said anything. Jeff Zucker, if anything, he'd be like, here are 100 things I'm interested in. He'd never be like, write this one thing. But I will say the part that I do feel like a liberation in is like, if I want to write about my late father-in-law, I write about that. If I want to write about youth sports, I write about that. And then of course, yes, I also write a lot about politics because but like it wasn't as though CNN or the Washington Post was like, don't write about these things. There was just like no lane to do it, right? It was like I was busy doing this other thing. So I love the idea. None of us are two dimensional, right? No one you meet in life is ever only interested in one thing. Because I remember I'd be like on Twitter or something, and I'd like say like something about sports, and people would be like, "Stay in your lane," and I'm like, "What? What? I don't understand. Like, I'm just like a human." Consuming things, and I'm a dad and a parent and a husband, and so like I'm really glad that more of us are trying to do this. I will tell you, I was stunned at the positive reaction I got when I first started writing. When I was thinking of it today because of the CNN layoffs, but when I first started writing more personal stuff about being laid off and like how hard that was, the reaction was like really nice, like really affirming. I don't know if you've only been on for 2 weeks, so I don't know if you felt that yet, but like it really is. Politics can drain your faith in humanity covering it, especially these days. And it was really nice to be like, oh, okay, there are like nice people who are kind of rooting for me.
Oh, I'm so glad you had that experience. I've had that experience for years. I think that even in the possibly toxic stew of social media, people have been wildly kind to me, really throughout. I've had a good experience on social media, not Twitter because I don't really do stuff on Twitter. I never really understood it, but on Facebook, on Instagram, people have been incredibly kind, and inside this whole Substack thing, people are incredibly kind. It's been very heartening, but I also will say that a couple things. One thing that is very different for me, I don't know if you feel differently about this, but in broadcast journalism, and I've worked at Fox, I've worked at CNN, I've worked at ABC, I never felt as though I should be giving my opinion because one of the rules, the
Yep.
iron rules of
Yep.
journalism is that you should not, as the journalist, offer your opinion. You need to be open, you need to be curious, but you need to stay out of the story. And so mine would, seep in, but I was always conscious of don't give your opinion, don't give your opinion, don't give your opinion. And I started to feel that was a little less satisfying lately.
Hmm.
Having to just be tabula rasa at
Yep.
all times because I don't think that this moment calls for pure neutrality. I think we're in a dangerous moment And I think that I'm so happy that here on Substack, I'm able to say, Donald Trump is a would-be autocrat. Donald Trump is a would-be dictator. These are his words, not mine. That's what he said. He doesn't want to serve for 4 years. He plans to stay longer. These are his words, not mine. And so I'm happy that I can just call a spade a spade. And again, like you, there was never any corporate overlord telling me not to do that. That's just one of the tenets of
Totally. Yes.
so I'm happy now that I can just go right there to the heart of the matter and call it.
Yeah, I think like um the the idea that has kind of infused both of our careers of like you never can say like this is good and this is bad, like I do think feels sort of outdated at some level. Like I think even if you view like the job of a journalist to call balls and strikes, well, you're still calling balls and strikes. You're not being like that was a pitch, that was another pitch. You know what I mean? Like you're still being like that was outside, that was over the plate. So I was like, there's some level of kind of judgment built in anyway, and I don't totally I don't know. I always say like I was thinking of this. I mean, obviously this is on my mind today. So this is CNN is about to go through or is going through currently today, like the biggest round of cuts since I got laid off in 2022. And um it's kind of like I read Mark Thompson's memo and I don't know him, but I read his memo and it's like I worry that we're in an emperor has no clothes situation for mainstream media at some level, which is like, I don't know that anybody has like a really good idea of how to make it work
I hear you.
business wise, not editorial, business wise.
Yeah, I understand. I think that it's obviously we're going through a real sea change, and I don't know where it shakes out. Obviously, I don't have that 30,000 foot view or a crystal ball of where it shakes out. But I do believe, and part of it is because of how engaged people already are on Substack with your Substack. And when I just did a live right after the inauguration, and people were tuning in and really engaged. So I know people will always want facts. They'll always want smart analysis.
Content. Yep. Totally context. Yep.
They'll always want reporting.
Yep.
They'll always want to have stories that they can't access themselves that we can, as journalists, shine a light on because we have more access than they do. So I don't know how that all shakes out. It feels as though there's this cataclysm, everything breaks apart, there's this earthquake, and then there's a regrouping and a
I
reshuffle.
think that's right.
That's what.
I did a conversation with Steve Schmidt last night, and he likened it to a glass bowl being thrown against the wall, and there's all these shards, and these shards of glass are starting to build little communities around them, and the question is kind of what's next. But I agree, like the whole like the media is dying thing. I think the media is just evolving. Like it's not there is remains a huge appetite for interesting, thoughtful content and commentary. The medium that people consume in it is clearly changing. Cable television is never going to go back to what cable television was 20 years ago, in the same way that print newspapers are never going to go back to what print newspapers were 35 years ago. So, but like people are still interested in this stuff, maybe more so now than ever. It's just the way that the medium they use to consume it is changing. And so that actually makes me like somewhat optimistic because I've seen a lot of like good, thoughtful people not be be kicked out of mainstream media or leave or whatever, and then find their way through this kind of meritocracy of alternative independent media and like build a real like audience and a sustainable business model. Like so it's not impossible in a way that like 20 years ago, if you didn't work for one of these like big media giants, it was really hard. There weren't like a lot of venues. There was no YouTube, there was no Substack, there was no Instagram, there was no Twitter, there was like none of that stuff existed. And it was like, well, how the hell do I get like even if I have great ideas and thoughtful analysis, how the hell do I get it to anyone without one of these platforms?
Absolutely. You were always serving at the pleasure of the king. And I remember, I had to, when I was coming up in broadcast journalism, I had to convince somebody trick them basically into giving me a job at a network. That was the brass ring. I
Yep.
had to get some, executive producer to like me enough to hire me, and then I would be able to finally do some reporting. And now it's much more democratic, and somebody can turn on a camera, as you say,
Yep.
and talk to their followers about what's on their mind. And all of that is great on some level. What worries me and what I have real anxiety about is that it's very hard to vet what is real information, obviously, and what's disinformation, what's misinformation. So you either have to really trust the messenger, as people do on Substack. Like,
Yep.
people on Substack have great reputations. You know them reputationally. You've seen them at some other, perhaps conventional place where they were following the rules, and you trust them and you're going to follow Crystalisa.
Yep.
But then there's a whole nother crop of people, and even younger people, who were not trained in the kind of ironclad, hard and fast rule.
Totally.
And so it's getting very muddy.
It's so funny you say that because I think and talk about this all the time, which is like the flattening of the media landscape, right? Which is like it used to be like CNN and the New York Times up here, and then like random person down here. It's like here now. Like I always say, if somebody wants to write a profile of me, what I'm doing, I would love for it to be in the New York Times because it'd get a lot of attention. But if it's on Substack, that's pretty good too. Like it's not like this huge gap anymore. That's good, right? Because I think the idea of these a handful of media companies with a handful of honestly mostly older white men executives uh, deciding what the news is not a good thing. But like all things, it's like the internet. There's a lot of good about it. There's a lot of bad about it. But like all things that have a lot of good, the bad is exactly what you said, which is like anyone can call themselves a journalist now. And I don't even care if they went to journal. I didn't go to journalism school, but I don't even care if they did that. My issue is the bar for credible sourcing, the bar for okay, this is just a rumor. That I have is does not that bar is not the same for everyone. And
No.
that worries me.
Yes, it should worry you, because even places that call themselves news channels are not operating and haven't been for a long time with that same bar. But of course, the buyers and the consumers don't know that, because the people who are not real journalists are not honest about that. So I mean, look, I believe that we are in this predicament of being in Trump part two because of that just what we're talking about, the chaos of the information system, and people who think they're getting real true facts when they're watching one station, because that station is masquerading as a news channel, and some other place that is still following the rules. I don't blame consumers that they don't know the difference. The graphics look the same, the people look the same.
Right.
Like it's so chaotic and muddy, and I think that has gotten us into this pickle where, I mean, it's bigger than a pickle crisis, where if you were watching Fox, you thought that there was, many crises. Basically, criminal immigrants were invading the country and coming for you, not only your jobs, but your life, and you were in big danger. So that's how they voted, because they
Yep.
believed they were getting that real, true factual information. Or if you were watching CNN, I think that you thought that the biggest issue in the election was danger to democracy. And
Yep.
so, neither one of those are wrong, but you need to understand the kind of amplification and context that each one was feeding you, particularly Fox, because they had their own business model for why they
Well,
wanted to scare people.
that's the thing that I think people don't understand is we ran journalism like a nonprofit for a really long time because it just made tons of money and we didn't have to worry about it. But then when it became less obviously profitable, the business end of it started to creep in. And the truth is, and this is true of Substack, of YouTube, of cable TV, of anywhere where there's political content, people want and are willing to pay for what I call fan service. They want people telling them what they want to hear. And Fox especially gives them that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and MSNBC in primetime gives them that. It's like yeah, they tell people what they want to hear because guess what? Those people continue to watch, and those people buy stuff from them, and they buy the anchor's books, and they, I mean, that's it is driven by financial incentives, and I feel like people don't grasp that piece of it. Like, it's like I always say, like, people are like, why is X show on, and or why are they doing whatever? And I'm like, the reason that they're doing that is because people watch it. You may not like people fighting on television, like on cable, but people watch it, and that's why they do it. And
Well, I'm
it's all ratings and financially driven.
Yeah, I don't think ratings are a bad word. I'm all for giving people what they want, as long as it's factual. If you're going to call yourself a news channel, you can't just give people what they want, which is bullshit. I mean, you can't just keep feeding people bullshit because they want it and they like it and it engages them and outrages them. That's not news. That's a different. That's
Totally.
something different. That's entertainment, or that's PT Barnum or whatever.
Yep.
So that's where I get angry. I don't get angry at people looking for ratings. It is a measure of what the audience is engaged in. Cool, that's helpful. But if it's news, it has to be fact based, and that's where I think we got into, not we, but I think that America got into real trouble. And look at look at the consequences.
All right, so I want to shift gears. I want to talk about your. I've written and talked a lot about my post CNN life, but let's talk about your post CNN life and how that. Like, how did you get from there to here?
So, I hadn't felt emotionally attached at CNN for a long time. And at this point in my life, I want to, if I'm going to be someplace 5 days a week, and, particularly if I was going to be getting up at 3 a.m., I mean, I had, since left the morning show and done other, yeah, shows at CNN. But if you're going to be going in 5 days a week and working till midnight, as I did on a couple of shifts, or getting up at 3 a.m., as I did for many, many years, you really also need the gratification of your purpose, feeling a purpose,
Yes.
a collegial spirit, and that you're all working together. And so I loved our time there, and I love CNN, and I think that it does excellent work. But since Jeff Zucker left, who was, our boss, and who I,
Brought both of us in, right?
yeah, hired us, and one of the great leaders in the news industry of our lifetime. Um, I think that I lost a lot of that. I mean, I felt that I had lost a lot of the esprit de corps that I had felt. So I didn't want to. It's too demanding of a job,
Yeah,
too important of a profession to just be like punching the clock.
totally.
Right. So I had so emotionally I wasn't as connected. And then I went through this personal tragedy of losing my husband. And I mean, that obviously really clears your mind. It focuses your perspective. But I already had a good perspective. It wasn't like that shifted my life perspective. I've always known what's important in life. But I just really did want to be closer to home. I wanted to be with my kids. I wanted to have more energy. I wanted to have more psychic energy. And so this experience is so much better. Like, I get to do it from home. I don't have to commute. I get to, as I say, talk about whatever I want,
Yep.
still connect with old friends and colleagues. So it just is sort of at the right time. It's the right moment at the right time. But I do really feel for all of our colleagues who today are getting the news, that they're being laid off, because I certainly know from my past. I'm not in this place anymore, but I know from my past how incredibly anxiety provoking when you're not going to have a paycheck. what
It it is, it's I do think some of it's just getting older, but I feel sort of the same way that you did, which is like I spent too much time at CNN, especially thinking like, how can I get on this? How can I get here? How can I climb this ladder? How can I climb that rung? And I didn't spend enough time. This is my own fault. It wasn't CNN's fault. I didn't spend enough time thinking about like, okay, but like, am I happy? And am I going to be happy if I get that next rung? Because you and I both know this. Uh, I always say, pick the TV person that you most want to be, or you think, man, that woman or man has really made it. And I guarantee you, because it's happened to me, and I'm sure it has happened to you. If you talk to that person, they will, not publicly but privately, they will have their own set of grievances and gripes and unhappiness. It's like you can't. There's never going to be a time where like if you define yourself solely through where you rank in the work hierarchy, you're never going to be happy. There's always going to be someone above you. There's always going to be someone who's more prominent, who's getting the magazine profile, who's making more money, who's the darling of the network. And I just think as much as I tried to insist, like, no, it's fine, the TV doesn't really matter. I wrap myself up in all of that positioning and jockeying too much. And I kind of forgot the things that, no, it wasn't like I was miserable, but like I forgot the things that really make me happy, which is like thinking, talking, and writing about politics and other stuff. Like I like doing that. I would do that. I mean, I started doing it when I had 20 followers or whatever because I just like doing it. But I think that I don't know. I think a lot of times your ambition is not a bad thing, but for me, it got me off track of like a 360-degree picture of my life. It was like, oh, well, I'm succeeding here at work. And then I didn't succeed at work, but I was succeeding at work. But I wasn't really focused on the other things because, like you said, in order to succeed in a job like that, it has to be the vast majority of my share. Like, if you're getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're doing that show, what, from 6 to 9, it's not like you're going to be a great kick ass mom and spouse all day because you have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I know.
It governs your whole life.
I know. When I would do it, people were always like, "God, what a great schedule! So you can be home with the kids." I was like, "Yes, I am physically present with the kids, if that's what you mean. I'm there in body, yes. But I mean, if they had like, Mom, we have to do I have to do a 5-page report on Frederick Douglass." I was like, "Oh my god,
Right? Yeah.
oh my god."
I mean, it dominates your life, and I think to me, it was like not until that was taken away was I like, oh, that wasn't great for me. It's interesting. One of the things that annoyed the shit out of me when I got laid off was everyone I met with was like, this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And I'd be like, is it? Because currently I have no job and I have a bunch of expenses. And like, unless you have a job you're offering me, then I'm not sure it is. I mean, people have to say, it's like at a funeral, people have to say something, even though it's garbage. Um, but like over time, what I've realized is like in truth, I wake up most days happier and more content today than I was 5 years ago or 3 years ago. And it's not perfect. It is a grind. It's not it's a job for a reason, but like I think I feel more fulfilled even though I'm less high profile. It's interesting. It's like a
Chris, I think that's a testament to you that you've found meaning. I wonder, I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder if men are more their identities are more wrapped up in their careers
yeah,
than, but I certainly know a lot of women who suffered identity crises after they left TV. Television has a particular way of imbuing you with identity because you get
totally.
so much positive reinforcement from the world that watches you and that likes you and that compliments you and all of that stuff. It's really kind of an external facing ego hit at all times.
It's you're so I was talking to someone who was leaving TV, a relatively prominent person, and I said, you know what? Like what I realized over time was I fucking loved when people recognized me when I was at Target. I loved when people would stop me in the street. And as much as I would be like, oh, it's not a big deal. I play time. But my God, like it was like the greatest ego hit of all times. I loved it. And um and I think like it's exactly what you said. Like TV is addictive in that way, and I think it does. You start to, at least I did. I shouldn't say you. I started to define myself so much from other people's affirmation of me, as opposed to like me. It was like, well, I must be good at this because people are coming up to me on the street, and it was like, well, yeah, but like it's kind of transient. You know what I mean? Like what I've realized over time is no matter how irreplaceable you think you are, you're always replaceable, especially by a big ass corporate media company.
Well, that's for damn sure. I mean, that is for damn sure. But I didn't have as much of that experience as you did about. I didn't tie my identity to it as much as you did, and I'm grateful that I didn't. I think most people do, but I don't. I didn't. I don't know. I don't know why. But I liked. I certainly liked when people came up to me at the supermarket, and I still do. But I didn't rely on it
I
in
mean,
that.
that's great. You're just more well balanced than me
I
and more mature.
You're right. There's no other explanation. um, but yeah, but I mean, I guess that the point is that I have been very heartened and very pleasantly surprised by this transition. I always worried. I did worry when I was on television every day. God, what will happen when I'm not on television every day? Will I be okay?
Yep.
I have sailed through that transition, I'm happy to report, and I get so much gratification from the instantaneousness of this, of what you and I are doing, and of being able to see the comments and being able to see people engaged. Like the ratings are a different version of that, but you would have to wait a day,
Yep.
see the ratings and go like, "Ooh, they really responded to that interview I did. That's good. That's a good feeling." But right now, it's instantaneous, this connection. And
And
so I'm really, I don't know, I find that same sort of fizzy adrenaline hit
I
from it.
get, and you know what's one thing that I've noticed too that is really nice is like as much as when I was writing or on CNN or when you're anchoring and like, oh, the ratings were good this day or that day, it's different than like I have a Substack. People are signing up because they want to read me. You know what I mean? It's like in a direct investment in you and who you are, and as opposed to like, oh, I turned on CNN and oh, I like Alisyn Camerota and I'm gonna watch this. You know what I mean? Like it's really it is it's a for me a smaller audience, but a much more satisfying experience because it's like people who are like, yes, I am plunking down my money. I am investing in this person because I like this person and what he has to say and how he approaches things. My gosh, like that is a really talk about gratifying. Like that's so much more gratifying than like my check coming every month in the mail from CNN. You know, like it or the Washington Post or any of these places because people are directly they're interested in you,
I'm glad
not
you said that.
CNN's Alisyn Camerota, not Fox News Alisyn Camerota, not ABC's Alisyn Camerota. Like just plain old Alisyn Camerota. Like and that to me is as from a human perspective really really important.
But do you feel that you have the same impact? Is that what's the impact scale? Like, in other words, when you write
Yeah,
about on Substack or you interview Steve Schmidt, do you feel like I felt that I had a lot of impact at CNN? I felt
absolutely.
often at Fox, where I just knew I felt again my purpose. I felt that people were tuning in specifically, and that I had an impact on their information sphere. Now, how do you feel? Where is
I
that?
think it's different, right? I mean, I think even I always say even though cable is losing ratings, well, not Fox, but MS and CNN are in the doldrums in ratings, and I don't know that they'll come back. There's still a couple 100,000 people watching at any one time, right? I mean, like it's not nobody. It's not like five people, but for me at the very start it was hard because I would write something on CNN.com and we obviously had software that tracked all this and there'd be 250,000 people on it, right? I think it's different. It's more qualitative than quantitative. I'm never going to have 250,000 on people on one thing. Hopefully not, because if I have that many, I've probably done something terrible. But um, but the people are super engaged. They are investing in you. And the other thing too is, and I really do think this is happening. I mean, it's in our self interest to say this, but I actually think it's true. I do think that flattening of the media landscape. It's like I don't think people really care if I work for CNN anymore. It's like if they like me, they'll find you wherever, and if they like you, they'll find you wherever. And if you write something that's really interesting and compelling, it can or do a really good interview on this. It's just a link. You know what I mean? It's just another link. It's like that's how people consume it now. So it's like I I think in the very, I'm trying to remember. I mean, it's been 2 years, but I remember in the very early days, I definitely felt the like shouting in a forest vibes. Like when I was just starting.
Yeah.
Um, and you always think more people are going to sign up than do at the very beginning. Because it's like, oh, for me, I was like, oh, wait, all those people were reading on CNN. They were just reading it because it was on CNN and I happened to be there as opposed to coming there just to read me. So there was a little of that at the start. But I think these things, like, they take on, as long as you're kind of like writing and talking about the things you're passionate about, I think it takes on a little bit of a life of its own. And I mean, it's a snowball rolling downhill.
Hmm. Well,
Um,
things. I have a couple thoughts about this. Number one, I find that just like how I was saying that the media world, there's been this cataclysm, and it will sort of, I assume, regroup in some way that we.
Totally.
I do think that at some point there's a saturation level where people are like, I'm paying $6 for Crystal, I'm paying $6
Yep.
for Alisyn Camerota, I'm paying this
Yep.
for Netflix, I'm paying this for HBO Max. Like, it's maddening to all of us. It's maddening. So there
Yeah,
has.
$6 a month's not a lot, but if I like 5 Substacks, that's $30 a month. That is kind of a lot.
Totally. And
Yep.
also it's a pain in the ass. And so I think there has to be a reconfiguring, a bundling back again,
Yep.
where it's one-stop shopping and you can get everything you want the way you
Yep.
used to CNN or ABC. So that's the first thing that I think will have to happen. But when you talk about the ratings, I'm glad you brought this up for what's happening right now at CNN and MSNBC. I don't think, I mean, sure. Could some of it be about compelling programming? Of course, all television is about whether or not you're producing compelling television. However, the CNN and the MSNBC ratings, I believe, are way down because people can't take it.
Yeah.
So the people who are the Democrats and the people who are middle of the road and not, MAGA and not in the right wing ecosphere haven't turned off because they're like, this sucks. They've turned off because their central nervous
Yep.
system
It's too
can't
much.
take listening to
Yep.
Donald Trump lie to them every day and, nominate incompetent, unqualified people. So that's what's happening. I don't really blame CNN and MSNBC. I understand that people are protecting their mental health right now. That's why they're disengaged.
Totally. And I think that's, I mean, I always say to people, like, you don't have to read everything. You don't have to. The other thing that I struggle with is, and you're new to Substack, but one thing that's hard is what works on Substack. It's the same thing that works a lot of times on cable. It's the same thing that works on YouTube. Is outrage,
Hmm.
and outrage sells in that. Like I did, for example, I chose not to write about the Elon Musk Hitler salute thing because it seemed to me like, first of all, there was a zillion people writing about it, and it seemed to me like Trump was doing actual things. The pardoning of the January 6th criminals, the uh, birthright citizen, trying to eliminate birthright citizenship, pulling us out of the Paris Climate Accords, pulling us out of the WHO. Like, I know Elon Musk is a powerful guy and he has influence over the president, but Elon Musk, whether he did the Heil Hitler thing or not, like, doesn't seem to me to be as important as these other things the actual president of the United States is doing with real and lasting policy concerns. But I know if I had written about the Elon Musk thing, it probably would have got me more subscribers. And that's one thing that's hard is that can you find a sweet spot between being responsible and not just engaging in outrage porn while also being authentic and like if you have strong feelings writing about them. I mean that's like a I go back and forth with that. I think it's a very hard balance to strike.
That's interesting to me. I don't have that problem because I'm just writing about things that actually light up my brain,
That's
and that's
great.
the beauty of it. So I did write a little blurb about the bishop
Yep.
in DC who, basically told the Good Samaritan story, but directed it at Trump and made a plea to Trump. Because that one, just watching how exercised JD Vance got from here, she was asking for Trump to understand that people are scared and that they need mercy and compassion. And
And
that,
quoting from the Bible.
yeah, and that set JD Vance off. And I was like, wow, we're through the looking glass. But in any event, so that was something that resonated with me because my teenage son and I had just read The Good Samaritan. He had had a class where they were reading different, sort of life passages, parables. And so that one spoke to me. So, I mean, obviously, Chris, I would just say that whatever speaks to you, and you do a great job of that.
No, that is exact. The thing that I've found more than anything is be authentic, right? I always say I'm one person. I'm not going to be able to write or talk about every story that's out there, especially in the era of a Trump presidency. I like to light up my brain thing. I'm gonna write about the things where I'm like, wow, what? Or like that seems crazy. Or like, oh, I have a thought on that, and that's not gonna scratch everyone's itch. You know what I mean? Like it's like I get it. Some people are not interested in some of the things I'm interested in, but I think that that's the way to build audience and community is to do that. It's like I always say to people, look, you're not going to agree with me all the time. If your bar for subscribing to me is you have to agree with everything that I say, don't subscribe because I guarantee you won't. That's not my North Star is not how can I write something that the most people agree with. It's how can I write something that based on my experience and my life and my reporting and my analysis, it feels true and authentic. And I think there is plenty of audience for that too. Because I mean, it's like everything else. Do the things you're passionate about, and then try to try to make enough money to live.
Well, I would also say, just on a moral basis, having worked at an outrage factory of Fox, I think it's incumbent upon all of us right now, particularly, to try to not tone down the outrage. There's a lot to be outraged about, but not to gin up the outrage,
Correct.
not to lead with outrage, because I mean, it's so easy to ignite that. It's just the easiest, crudest, lowest common denominator thing you can do, which is outrage someone. And there's so much of that being pumped out in the right wing hemisphere. I forced myself to listen to a right wing podcast recently just because I wanted to see what they were doing and I wanted to educate myself. I was like, oh my God. I was
Yeah, it's
shocked by the shit that they're pumping out. I was like pelting the laptop with a tomato because it wasn't true. Like the outrage also requires you to lean into conspiracy theories, you to lean into debunked things that take 1 second on your phone to debunk, and they didn't do it. And so I'm just really outraged by the outrage.
Yeah, no. What I always say is like you can't make everything a mountain. Like there are actually molehills. If we make everything a mountain, then it's meaningless. Like every mountain is meaningless. Then, like there are actual things that require us to be like, this is wrong. We should stand against this. And if we make everything like, I can't believe this just happened, it kind of takes away the power of it's the boy who cried wolf. I mean, it's exactly that parable over and over again. All right, I have to in the work life balance. I have to go pick my children up from the bus.
That sounds important.
You rock. Let me just make another pitch for Alisyn. So Alisyn Camerota is the name of the Substack. ALISYN CAMEROTA. Look at that. I did that without even looking.
That's amazing.
Do me a favor and subscribe because look, we need to. I say this every time I do one of these. If you believe in the necessity of journalism, if you believe in the necessity of people who have this training, who are speaking from an authentic, transparent, independent point of view, you need to support them. This is not something that we don't just have I wish I had a money tree out back, but we don't have one of those. And I don't think Alisyn does either. So if you want to continue to support us, you need to continue to support us. So please do so. Please go check out Alisyn's Substack. And Alisyn, let's do this again. When you're a little bit, you're more of a veteran, more than 2 weeks in. But I'm thrilled to have the chance to talk to you. I'm glad you're doing so well.
Chris,
Um,
thanks. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for doing this,
oh my gosh, of course.
about your success, and I really appreciate the boost to mine. And I'll check in with you in a couple of weeks, and we'll see how we're doing.
Follow Alisyn. Go do it right now, people. All right, take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Thanks for tuning in.